Good morning. So for anybody who is wondering, I will not be playing this ukulele today and singing for you. And my brother did tell me this morning that if that was my plan, he was staying home. So that'll tell you where we are on those particular giftings. But we'll come back to the ukulele here in just a minute. So Happy New Year, first of all. We made it to 2025. If any of you feel like that is the accomplishment in and of itself, then here you go. We have this new opportunity for this fresh start in this new year. That's exciting. I'm always curious. I didn't ask anybody this morning, but after church, if anybody would love to tell me, I'm always curious about people's New Year's traditions, like New Year's Day traditions. Like, we always eat the same meal every New Year's Eve. My grandmother was very superstitious. Obviously, I am not. But if we did not eat black-eyed peas in her house on New Year's Day, then the new year was sure to be a disaster. That was her belief, her very certain belief. So we honor her memory by eating black-eyed peas every New Year's Day. Every New Year's, never failed. This year they came out of a can, doesn't matter. Still, we ate those black-eyed peas. Some of us under duress, since not everyone likes them, but we did. So I'm just very curious about your New Year's Day traditions. What do you love to do? What is it your family loves to do? Maybe there's no tradition at all. Maybe you just rest. If you stay up to see the new year come in, or if you don't, like all those things I'm very curious about. So if anybody wants to share with me your New Year's traditions after, I would love to hear them. But as we start off this new year, last week we started this new sermon series. We're titling it Resolved. We're just really playing around with the idea of the New Year's resolution. And so if you have New Year's resolutions, that's great. If you don't, that's great. But the idea of this sermon series, really just to sit in Exodus 3, that's kind of what I introduced last week. We just want to sit in Exodus 3 for a little bit of time. Instead of just moving on, instead of just jumping in, moving fast through the text, we just want to linger here and invite the God of the universe to speak to us through this narrative. And as we do that, what my hope is, my prayer is for myself, for you, is that we would really begin to understand something differently about learning from the past, finding joy in the present, and having vision for the future. What I really believe is that those three things, the past, the present, and the future, and often we think of the past, sometimes we're trying to forget the pain of the past or whatever, but often the pain or the struggle of the past, living in our present, finding joy in our present, but also having this goal, this vision, this purpose, living with intentionality for the future. Those three things kind of operate in a natural tension in our life. And I believe that that's really a biblical picture, and that God is inviting us to be people who live with purpose and intentionality. And so that's really my hope, is to kind of unpack some of those things today. So last week, we started in Exodus 3 with the burning bush moment for Moses. And I kind of invited anyone who was here listening to kind of a little homework assignment as we reflect together on the last year. And I'm going to come back to that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to stop before we even jump into today's scriptures and just do a little burning bush reflection. Let's just think a little bit about this burning bush moment. So for Moses, this was a God moment. It was a place where God showed up, got Moses' attention, and invited him into something. And what does that really mean for us? So as I was just reflecting on that this week, thinking about transitioning into this next passage, these are some questions that I've just been contemplating for myself and that I want to invite you into as well. First, do you believe that we serve a God who speaks? Maybe that's an easy question, right? Like in theory, I think most of us would say, yes, that is true. He is God with us. He is a God who speaks. His biblical narrative is clear. Here's what I believe to be a harder question. And I invite you to really ask yourself the question, not just in a superficial way, but in the way that maybe you ponder beyond right now. Do you believe he speaks to you? Because that is a very different question. In my personal experience, in my experience in the church, most of us believe that the God of the universe wants to speak and be in communion with his people. But also, many of us don't live, act, or engage in such a way that we expect him to speak to us. When I wake up this morning, when I wake up tomorrow morning, when I go to work, when I'm up in the middle of the night with my children, when I'm going through the day-to-day mundane, ordinary moments of my life, do I anticipate the presence and the voice of God? And I think that that is an area where we maybe need to have some conversation with him. Because I think that in reality, in theory, yes. In reality, maybe not as much. We believe he speaks to other people. We believe he spoke to Moses. We believe he spoke to the disciples. You maybe even believe he speaks to me. But do you believe? And when the word believe, like the Greek word for believe, the way believe is used in the New Testament, that word actually has a lot of action involved in it. It's not believe like passively like we use it. It's believe like with action. Believe unto action. That's a different thing. So do I believe unto action that God speaks to me, wants to speak, engage, lead, and move in my life? Do I live in a way that reflects that? Do you expect to see him and hear him in your day-to-day life? That's what we're talking about. If those things were true, like really, really, really deeply true in my life, in your life, how would my life change? How would your life change? If you believe that unto action, if you woke up every day expecting it, looking for it, inviting it, believing it, how would your life change? And then I think the next question is a much, much bigger question, and one that we definitely don't always think about, and that is, how would your world change if you lived in a hearing, doing relationship with the God of the universe? So how would your life change? Yes. But remember, the whole point of the gospel is that as we experience the goodness of God, we are light and salt into the world. And so only to the degree that we experience God can we ever impact the world in which we live. And I don't know about you, I shared this many weeks ago that I've struggled in the last year to see the goodness of God in the world, being transparent. It is much easier for me to feel angry or hurt or sad or frustrated or disappointed, whatever it is, social media, TV, work, people, family. It's so easy to just see the frustration, the sadness, disappointment, and much less easy for me over the last year to see the goodness of God at work. And so I think a lot of us, we look at the world and we feel frustrated and we want to know where God is. We want to know what God's doing and why isn't this changing and how could this be? And why doesn't the church have impact? And why isn't the church growing? And why aren't these things happening? But I think those might be not the wrong question. There's no wrong question. But we're missing an important question. Because I think the answer to all of those things starts with us. If I am growing in my hearing, doing relationship with the God of the universe, and he is changing my world, if the good news is impacting my life in new and powerful ways, and then I go into my world, mine, the people that I intersect with every day, every week, every year, the people of influence in my life, the people of peace in my life, when I go into those circles, when I begin to follow God's leading, when I begin to be willing to deal with the things of the past and invite Him in my present and look towards a future plan, when I begin to be open to that movement in my life and I begin to share the good news of my life in my world, then the world changes. That's the answer. And I think sometimes in the church we think that's the pastor's job. Maybe there's even people in this congregation who think, well, when we get our new pastor, then this can happen. There is no then. There is only now. There is only, how does God want to intersect with your world today? And if you experience the goodness of God today, how can you then affect change in your world today and tomorrow and the day after that? And yes, a new pastor will be part of that. Yes, your church will have a plan, a vision, whatever, but you are the church. We're going to get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So for me, I just want to share a little bit about what that has looked like, that hearing-doing relationship or that like burning bush moment for me, the idea that there's a God who speaks in my life to me and for me and with me. I just want to share a little bit about what that looks like in my life. And I always want to be so careful when I share stories about my life. I am not saying this is the way God should show up in your life. I believe God speaks a variable language. He showed up as a burning bush for Moses because clearly that's what Moses needed. I sometimes need more than a burning bush, for the record. But I believe he speaks a various language. No story that I ever share is meant to say that this is anything about me. It's just an example, I think, that God invites us to be vulnerable and do life together. And so I want to share what this journey has looked like for me this week. I worked on my homework. I did my reflection. But just in terms of God moments, these are some things really over the last couple of weeks that have happened. And I'm going to call this short story, which I'm going to hope to make short, but you all know I'm long-winded. I'm going to call this 2 Falls and a Ukulele. What a title. A book writer, I am not. Maybe a kid's book, who knows. So if the next picture, the next slide, is a picture of our family. So every year for Christmas, instead of a lot of gifts, we give our family an experience, a way to spend time together. So for the last couple of years, that has been a ski trip. I don't ski, but I like cocoa and snow, and so I go. But these are the skiers and snowboarders here in my family. And this is titled Just Before the Fall. I did get my husband's permission for this on the way here just before church when it was too late to do anything about it. But so they go up on the hill, and my husband's a great skier. I quit because I just could not keep up with him. I fell the whole time. It was not fun for him. It was not fun for me. I don't ski anymore. But my children, I would say, have now outpaced him. They are, sorry, hun, they are better than him. They're younger, they're faster, all the things. But he keeps up. They have a great time together. It's one of the great joys of my life to see them all together on the mountain having a great time. My brother and I go up, my grandkids, we went up, tubed, did all the things, enjoyed them. So this is the moment before their first big day of skiing. They're super excited. Everybody's glad to be there together. Big fun. One of the few times we're all together as a family. And they are skiing. We're coming up. My grandchildren and I are coming up to meet them midway through the day. And when I walk off the gondola, my husband is sitting right on the bench, like just outside the gondola. And I thought, oh, he knew I was getting ready to be here. And he was just waiting to see me. How sweet. And so immediately I was like, oh, honey, you didn't have to stop skiing and come meet me. Didn't take me about 10 seconds to realize that was not the situation. He had taken quite the fall, and his brain was rattled, and he was sitting there trying to recover from that, which was even more fun to hear my 16-year-old tell the story later of how he waited at the bottom of the hill, and he thought, I've never seen Dad ski that fast. I wonder what's happening. And then right after that thought, down he went. and he took a very, very hard tumble. And because we're not as young as we used to be, he has not recovered maybe as well as he used to. And he's still, if there's any medical professionals in the room, maybe encourage him to see a doctor, still experiencing some pain in his neck and back. So just let that sit for a minute. Great anticipation, great time. Then the fall happens, and now for weeks, lingering pain and discomfort, and a little razzing from his kids, but that's neither here nor there. Then this next picture is a picture of a beautiful trail. It's one of my favorite little hikes. You can do a 2-mile hike or a 6-mile hike. It's about 30 minutes from our house. And I love to do, on New Year's Day, one of my favorite things to do is something that I love, because somehow it feels like if I do something I love on New Year's Day, that is going to set the tone for the rest of the year. And I like to live intentionally. And so I said to my husband, who does not like hiking nearly as much as me, could we please just take the dogs and go on a little hike today? He says, because he loves me, even though his neck and his back hurts, he says, sure, let's go on this hike. And so we take off on this hike, and we're walking down the snowy path, and I'm just taking in, I'll show you some of the other pictures, they're beautiful. I'm taking in the scenery, I'm reflecting on my homework for the week and on the goodness of God, and I never experience God anymore than in the beauty of nature. And so we're just hiking along, and everything's good, and I'm totally distracted. And you guys, we have 2 dogs. One is a 100-pound Rottweiler who loves the snow better than life. And my kids would say, I love that dog more than I love them. May or may not be true. We won't unpack that today. But I'm usually very aware of her presence because she's very big. But in this moment, we're walking along, and I'm just enthralled in the beauty of nature, and I take out my phone to take pictures. And just as I do, this dog barrels up behind me out of nowhere, dead legs me or whatever you call it, right in my knee, and I go immediately to the ground, immediately. The phone flies way off into the snow, and I am like, immediately I know my knee is hurt. My husband's very worried. He's like, do you want to turn around? No, I want to keep going. We're going to do this hike. But y'all, I could have sold that dog on Marketplace that second. If I had any cell service, she would have been listed for sale immediately. I was so done with her, she didn't even come back to check on me. I love that dog more than life. She just stood down the path and stared at me like, what are you waiting on, lady? Let's go. And I felt anger. Like all the serenity, all the peace immediately in that moment. I was so angry, so frustrated, hurt, determined to keep going. Now, why am I telling you all these things? I'm gonna answer that question in a second. So now to the ukulele. This ukulele was my grandfather's. It is literally one of the only things I have of my grandparents. My grandparents were the constants in my life. I lived with them for a good chunk of my life. They were my people. But they were also very broken people. I've shared with you before that I came from a very dysfunctional family. They were certainly part of that dysfunction. Some of the worst memories I have in my life are from their house, and some of the best memories in my life I have from their house. But I keep this, and it's one of my cherished possessions. It's worth nothing of value, but to me, and it sits always somewhere in my house, and I cleaned it all off as part of unpacking Christmas, and I moved it to a new spot. But I was overwhelmed as I was cleaning it, and I was beginning to put it up. I was just overwhelmed with the memories associated with the person whose this was. My grandfather was an alcoholic my entire life. And he was a violent alcoholic. He was the sweetest, kindest, best man when he was sober. My best memories are sitting on his back porch and him playing this ukulele and us singing some great little songs. They are my best memories with him. They had nothing. He dwindled all of their money away, not able to work. Alcohol ruined his health, ruined his life. They both suffered for it. But when he was sober, he was a beautiful, kind, loving man. And those memories I cherish. But when he wasn't, he was an angry, mean man. Two very different people. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this, one, because I gave you a homework assignment that said, like Moses, we have to look at the past. We have to be willing to explore the pain of our past, and we have to also be willing to see the joy and the goodness in life. And those two things also live in tension together. I promise I'm getting to scripture here. But these two things are very important. And I think we have to understand how God wants to work in our life. So these were God moments for me. These were things that I have been reflecting on and thinking about all together. And my question is, God, what do you want me to see here? What do I need to know here? What can I learn in these events? I mean, every time I move, my knee hurts, so I'm thinking about it. And then God really grabbed my attention around this ukulele. And I'm just like, God, what is it that I need to see here? I'm going to tell you my takeaway from my fall, and then I'm going to hope that you can think of the spiritual application. Here were my God moments, my takeaways from my conversation about my snowy fall with God. Dogs act like dogs. So why am I mad at this dog? There's a lot of things in my life, a lot of people in my life, a lot of things in the last year, 2 years, because really I've reflected from my homework I did 2 years. I think God needs me to understand that sometimes people and events hurt me. But when the world hurts me, I can't hate them. Because dogs just act like dogs. The lost just act like the lost. People are human. We're people. Life is hard. Who am I going to blame? Who am I going to be mad at? Why am I going to sit in anger and unforgiveness? Dogs will always act like dogs, and sometimes that is going to intersect in my life in ways that hurt me. A fall or a failure, a mistake, or a hard spot does not have to ruin my day or my week or my year, and it most certainly does not mean that God cannot use me, or He does not love me, or He does not have good for me, or He does not have a plan for me. My knee hurts, but it will heal. And in the days now when my knee is hurting and I can't do some of the things that I want to be able to do, what I can know is that is a reminder that God wants to teach me something. Did God make me fall? No. But does God, in His beautiful economy, take everything in our life and speak and move and use it? Yes. So every time I feel this pain in my knee, I can understand that just like the other pains that I'm carrying from 2023 and 2024 into 2025, even though they're still there, I still feel them, they're still hard, God is healing me. And just because I still feel pain doesn't mean the healing isn't happening. The healing is happening. And I can know it, and I can believe it, and I can keep moving forward in spite of it. And at the end of the day, I had a story to tell you today. I can use what happens in my life. If I let God speak and intersect and move, I can use these things, these pains, these hard spots in my life to share the goodness of God with other people. So your God moments, I hope, don't involve falls, snowy falls. But I hope that whatever it is, wherever you let God speak and you hear Him and you respond and you guys move together, that can then be a tool to use to share the goodness of God with those around you. And we'll unpack that more in just a minute. And I will never put away this ukulele. Because just like dogs will be dogs, my grandfather was a sick and hurting man. And he raised hurt children, and sometimes he hurt me, but that did not make him a bad man. It made him a broken man. And I have to understand that so that I can move forward with compassion and love for a hurting and dying world. And we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. When I look around me and I see people, and there are people in my life right now, like yours, who cause me pain. But I have to see beyond the choices they're making and the things that they're doing. And I have to understand that they are children of the King of Kings just like me, and He loves them, and I have an opportunity to pray for them and to want good for them. My favorite one, this is not my favorite song, I can't say that. A great song, which I've probably mentioned before because it's a great one to mention. If you haven't heard it, go find it. But this is a country song about praying for people, like things like a flower pot falls from a windowsill, lands on their head, or, like that's not what I mean when I say pray for people. Not like pray that they get the justice they deserve. That's kind of where I've been, y'all, in 2024. I'm sorry, that's confession. I think God is using this ukulele to remind me that just like my grandfather was not a bad man, there are people in my life right now who are in real time causing heartache and pain for me, but I can still invite the goodness of God in their life. I can set boundaries, I don't have to love the pain, but I can see them as children of the King. And when I do that, it can change my understanding of what is happening. I don't have to take it personally. It doesn't have to destroy me. It can give me perspective, and it can give me hope, and it can give me purpose. So those are my God moments. Hopefully it's going to all come together at the end. Hang in there with me. But I invite you to if you hear nothing that comes after this, I do invite you to answer that question. Do you believe that God wants to speak to you? And believe unto action. And if so, what does that look like today, tomorrow, the next day, every day? He wants to speak every day. I believe it. So if you will, look with me at Exodus 3 again. And just like I'm asking you to bear with me for my long story and now hit the scripture, I also want you to bear with me as I move about Exodus 3. And we started at the beginning, and now we're going to skip all the way to the end, and hopefully that too is going to all come together at the end of this series. But if you know Exodus 3, which a lot of you do, this is the burning bush story. So God gets Moses' attention with the burning bush. Moses responds in a real identity moment. Yes, God, here I am. They have this moment. And then God lays out this vision or this plan. And you can understand why I want to save that for the end, right? This is a vision series. So we're going to save the vision for the end. But God invites him into this vision that involves him going back into Egypt, which is not what Moses or anybody else wants to do, right? Like to revisit the source of his pain and all of his dysfunction. And so, like you would expect, there's some negotiation that happens between God and Moses, and God is having to assure Moses that he's the man for the job, and we're going to come back to all that as well. But then when you get to the end of this chapter, God is explaining to Moses, this is what's going to happen. And it's important that God does this because then we can see, as God makes these kind of plans or promises, these become benchmarks where you can see that God's keeping his promises and these things are happening. But these two verses, Exodus 3, 21 and 22, have become some of my favorite verses in all Scripture. So he says, as part of this plan, so that you can escape, you can get out of Egypt, and you're going to head towards this new life that I've invited you to. You're going to lead these people out. This is one of the things I want you to understand. I am going to cause the Egyptians to look favorably on you. He's like, I'm going to change their heart. I'm going to change their mind. They will give you gifts, and they will give you gifts when you go, so you will not leave empty-handed. Every Israelite woman will ask for articles of silver and gold and fine clothing from her Egyptian neighbors and from the foreign women in their houses. So try to imagine what God is saying here. You think God is inviting you into something hard or unusual or unbelievable? You think it's hard to have a vision of hope for your future? Try to imagine what God is saying to Moses. I want you to go back to the source of all your pain and dysfunction, where you were hated, where you're a murderer, where you're all the things. And then I want you to help all these people escape. And even though they're going to hate you and want to do everything to stop you, I'm going to change their mind. And not only am I going to change your mind and you're going to get out, but they're going to give you things. They're going to go, here, yes, have gold, have silver, have all my things. How unbelievable does that sound? God is in the business of doing the unbelievable, just saying. You will dress your sons and daughters with these, stripping the Egyptians of their wealth. Okay, God says it. Moses is probably thinking, whatever, that's ludicrous. Maybe not Moses, but that's what I'd be thinking. Now, flash forward just a little bit. Now Moses and the people are preparing their exodus from Egypt. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed. They asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold. The Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. And so they stripped the Egyptians of their wealth. God said it. Moses tried it. It worked. Well, good news. Now they get to carry all this through the wilderness. Good news. So what in the world is that all about? Yes, it shows the power of God. I don't know about you, but many, many times in my life, I'm like, God, I know you're doing something right here. I can see it. But I don't know where in the world this is going. If you could just tell me the plan, I would be much more inclined to go along. That's just who I am. I like to imagine Moses and these people were the same way. They did as they're instructed, and they take all the wealth, and they head on their way. Now flash forward again. They're in the wilderness. And I want you to understand the implication of this. We want to over-spiritualize things sometimes. I want you to understand the practical reality of this. The people of the Hebrew people leave Egypt. Up until this point, they are just a bunch of tribes. They leave, as Moses leads them out, they leave Egypt, they leave the enemy's territory, they go out into this not yet, into this wilderness, and they become a nation. For the first time, they leave Egypt, and now they are a nation of people. They are unified. They are no longer a group of tribes. They are a collection of people. They are a nation of people. They are a people. They are the people of God. And then God says, okay, now I want you to build a tabernacle so that I can come and I can dwell among you. A tent of meeting, a place where they can worship together, where God can reside and be with them. And now they've become a church. They've become a church. They've become a people who worship together and experience God together and follow God together and are on mission together. And that's what He invites us into. That is it. That's the picture. And so now imagine there are a people for the first time. They're unified as a people. They are a church. He's inviting them to be the church, the people of God. And this is what God says. The Lord says to Moses, tell the people of Israel to bring me their sacred offerings. Accept the contributions from all those whose hearts are moved to offer them. Here is a list of sacred offerings you may accept from them: gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet thread, fine linen, goat hair for cloth. You can keep going. I'm not going to read that whole list because that doesn't matter. You know what matters? Where did those things come from? They were slaves. This was the enemy's wealth. Everything that the enemy meant for their harm, God is using for their good and for His glory. The things that they carried out of Egypt that were weights, that were possessions of an old life, that they probably wanted to forget, that they never wanted to think about again. God took all those things and He said, those are the things that is going to build my church. Those are the things that are going to change the world. So when I ask you to go back and look at the last year, 2 years, whatever, when I ask you to be willing to list out the things that were really, really hard, to revisit the things that caused you pain or to cause you hurt, then know this. It's not because the desire is for you to experience pain and hurt, but for you to understand that in God's economy, nothing is wasted. Every pain, every failure, every hard spot, every struggle every sleepless night, every tear, every joy, every laughter, every good thing. God is using those to prepare you to be exactly who He needs you to be today and to change your world today and for the future. Why? Exodus 25:8. I kept that on a separate slide because this is, to me, it's just such a beautiful picture. Have the people of Israel build me a holy sanctuary so that I can live among them. Have the people of Israel use what they have taken out of their pain, out of Egypt, and use it to build me a sanctuary. Use it to build our church so that we can be the people that God called us to be. I believe that in this season today, God is inviting us. He is inviting me. I'm just telling you, I've enjoyed so much hearing from Him this week in these stupid little ways I shared with you. He has invited me into such healing, into such hope, into such joy for the year 2025. And I believe that as He wants to do the same for you, all in different ways than me, but I believe He wants to do the same for every single one of you as individuals, but I believe He wants to do this for us as a church too. In the same way, understand this. The temptation in the church is to think that a pastor is going to solve the problem. A pastor is going to make things happen, to reach the community, to grow the church, whatever. Guys, I believe God has somebody perfect for you moving forward. I'm so excited about what is to come, but this is what I know. That's not the answer. That's not the hope you're looking for. It's not. You, I, we are the church. You want to know how to grow the church? Be light into the world. You want to know how to be light into the world? Use the things that you have carried up until this day. All the hard things, all the pain, all the struggle. Use those things to minister to the world around you. You've suffered grief. At the least, you're going to have a great story to tell. You're going to be able to commiserate, to meet other people in their grief and share how God has been good to you. Prepare yourself. That's a plan. It could be someone in the grocery store you meet. It could be in a coffee shop. It could be someone at church. It could be the community. Maybe you're going to lead a grief group. And you're going to meet people who have all different faith backgrounds right in the middle of their grief. And you're going to share the good news of Christ in meaningful ways. And that is going to lead them to Jesus. Maybe that's the picture. Maybe it's a divorce. And maybe, at the least, you're going to share the good news with someone. You're going to share your experiences with someone. Maybe, more than that, you lead a divorce care group. Maybe you're a young parent in the throes of mothering and fathering, and you know what all those struggles are, and you meet with other young families, and you experience the struggles and the pain of parenting together with other people, and in the process, you share the good news of Christ. You change someone else's life through your own struggle. You guys have this beautiful, amazing building. If you haven't walked around it lately, or maybe you never have, please do. I hope I'm allowed to say that. Please walk about. Open the doors. You guys, I can just imagine these rooms like a beautiful nursery, I guess. Imagine it just filled in the middle of the week with young moms who are there to let their kids play together and share their faith together and encourage one another. A room filled with people who are struggling through grief or whatever struggle or pain or whatever. And they're meeting here. And it's not the pastor leading it, but it's you as ministers, of members of the holy priesthood, using your life to minister to a lost and dying world. That is the picture. Here's the takeaways. In God's economy, nothing is wasted. Everything that the enemy meant for your harm, He can and will use for your good and His glory, and for the goodness of His people. We are the church. He dwells among us. What we can do together will always be better than what we can do alone. That's the beauty of the church, of the ecclesia. There's power in our collective stories. Every one of these people took different things from Egypt, and it was those collection of experiences or of things that built the tabernacle. The weights we bring from the past will become the vehicles for carrying Christ into our world. That's a fact. That is what it looks like in the biblical narrative. That is what God invites us into. And if we despise our past, if we refuse to deal with the pain, if we refuse to let God speak and move, we miss the opportunity to be light into the world. We can know Jesus. We can look towards heaven, but we miss the beautiful opportunity it is to be light into the world. So last week I gave you a homework assignment. The homework assignment was to spend some time reflecting on the last year or years. I did too, because I didn't do it the year before because I was just surviving. And so just list out some of those hard things, list out some of those good things. I want to ask you to go back to that this week if you're playing along. If you're not, that's fine. But if you're playing along, I invite you to go back to that list and say, God, where are you trying to get my attention here? Because God used some of these moments, a ukulele and a fall this week, to take me back to my list, to teach me some lessons, to say, hey, there's some ways you responded where you didn't let me help you. You responded. You responded out of emotion. You responded out of your feeling, and you did not let me help you, and that made things worse. It didn't make things better. And that's not condemnation. I don't believe he ever is a God of condemnation or guilt or shame, but I believe that what he wants to do is he wants to take those reflections and he wants to invite us into something, not guilt us into something, invite us into something new and something good. So just, where does he want to get your attention? What does he want to say? Where does he want to speak? Where does he want to move? And then as we come into the next couple of weeks, I want us to spend some time thinking, now what do we want to do with that? What is he inviting us to? What is a vision for the future? As a church, I invite you to walk around and pray. Look at this space. This is a tremendous space and a tremendous place with tremendous people. My family and I are constantly amazed by your kindness and your goodness and your authenticity. My daughter and my son-in-law were here. They've been in ministry. He was a pastor, college pastor, worship leader. They just had nothing but amazing things to say about you as a people. There is no limit to what God can do, wants to do through you. I don't have to assume that. I don't have to guess it. I know it because I know who he is. The only thing that will ever limit that is us. That's all. Julie, thank you so much. I'll be praying for you this week.